Welcome to Films and Stuff with your hosts, Pete Mitchell and Ethan Hunt.
Hi, everybody. Welcome back to Films and Stuff. I'm Ethan, joined by Pete. Hey, Pete.
How's it going, buddy?
Everything is great. We have, what are we calling this? A mini film review. Is that right?
We're going to talk about a couple of movies that we both saw, but maybe don't have that much to say to justify a separate episode on.
So I have to say, it's kind of like, let's call it the good old days. Both of these were cinematic releases.
Yep.
Both of them have kind of A-list stars, but neither one of them are like kind of like this billion-dollar blockbuster. They're like just proper good old Friday night movies, right?
100%. Simple, low stakes. And again, I don't mean low stakes to say that they're not exciting and things don't happen in them, but low stakes in the sense that if you don't watch it in the cinema, you have to avoid people at work because you want to avoid spoilers. None of that.
Yep.
Generally speaking, these kinds of movies tend to be on the side of fun. They tend to be quick. They don't generally tend to be franchise movies. I wouldn't expect to see sequels to either of these movies.
Nope.
I wouldn't say
In one case,
no
hopefully
to them,
not.
but yeah, I think that they would be absolutely fine.
Okay, so first things first, which one do you want to start with?
Shall we start with, obviously, the most important person on the planet in Nicolas Cage?
We're going to talk about Pete's alter ego, Nicolas Cage.
My very public man crush.
Man crush Nicolas Cage, who starred in Renfield. And to put this in perspective, when you told me, hey, you're going to watch Renfield, I was like, I have no idea what you're talking about. And you're like, you know, the new Nick Cage movie. And I'm like, still not with you. You said, yeah, he's Dracula and it's about his assistant named Renfield. And honestly, if there was like a balance of 50%, I was 50% sure you were serious and equally 50% sure that you were just making it up to see if I would bite. You know?
No pun intended.
Really, I was just kind of like, oh, it's about Dracula's assistant named Renfield? Like, I'm sure I couldn't have heard you correctly. But it is. And is that like lore? Is it? I mean, I don't really know that much about Dracula, but Dracula had an assistant named Renfield?
It is. It wasn't,
Really?
He wasn't just his assistant. He was his familiar. So that is the case. That was in the books. I think he was also in the original movies from the 50s or whenever it was. I'm pretty sure we see Renfield, although he may not have been mentioned. But I haven't seen that movie in decades now. But yes, he is a real part of Bram Stoker's lore.
I had no idea. So
obviously we have Nicolas Cage playing protagonist / antagonist because he's somehow both in every movie. Dracula. Nicholas Hoult, who is the lead, who plays Renfield.
That's right.
And then, of course, the second lead is Awkwafina.
I sincerely do like Awkwafina.
Yeah, she's great. And then, of course,
my crush.
For sure. I hope we're talking about Shore.
Oh, yes. Not Ben Schwartz.
Yeah.
Not Ben Schwartz.
Right. So the main antagonists, there are two antagonists. It's a mother-son duo in the show.
By the way, could not have two less likely people to be mother-son, right?
Correct.
Shora is Iranian, and Ben Schwartz, I believe, is Jewish.
Yes.
Right? Like, very unlikely pairing as, I mean, for a lot of reasons, as mother-son, right?
Yeah. So in any case, we've got Shore. God, heaven forgive me for missing this name.
Agdashlu. Yeah.
There you go.
I mean, she's a bad guy, like a mob boss.
She's a mafia gangster. She's the head of the crime family.
Bella Francesca. What a name.
Awesome name. So if you don't recognize the name, I wouldn't be surprised. But she played
The Expanse.
In The Expanse. That's right. She's really, really, really good. What I didn't know before this movie is how funny she was. Right. So I was quite
super
pleased
funny.
with that.
Yeah.
And then, of course, you've got her son played by a hapless Ben Schwartz, who most people will recognize from Parks and Rec and from a variety of other comedies. Yeah, the premise is super simple. Dracula, as we know, is immortal, and his familiar is as well. They've been traveling from basically Eastern Europe to the Western Europe, and they've now landed themselves in New Orleans. And they're now running low on funds. And the reason they've had to move every time is because Dracula inevitably snaps. The townsfolk inevitably start trying to attack him. He survives. He has to escape and move so that he can start the cycle over again. And so now they're restarting in America in
New Orleans.
Right. The premise is super simple. He's in a toxic relationship. We're talking about Renfield here. He's in a toxic relationship. He's trying to get over Dracula, as it were.
He's trying to leave his employment. Yeah.
Right. He's trying to escape the cycle of abuse and toxic relationshipness. And in doing so, you know, shenanigans happens. He ends up teaming up with Awkwafina, who plays a police officer who's like the only non-corrupt police officer in the New Orleans PD.
True.
And they end up squaring off with Ben Schwartz and his mother because they want to use Dracula's powers to take over all of the crime syndicates.
So the plot is not really, I have to say, the plot is much better than I expected. I don't really have any problems with the plot. It's pretty simple. It's straightforward. It's understandable. Given the subject matter, it's within the realm of belief. What do you think of the movie, though?
I liked the movie a lot for what it was. And the movie wasn't trying to be anything more. It was simply trying to be a mid-budget comedy. Instead of trying to be a comedy without any lore, without any established characters, which tend to be more of a punt, they simply said, hey, let's take the character of Dracula, let's put him in a funny situation, let's twist it so that Dracula isn't the main character, and build a funny story around that. So for what they were going for, I thought they nailed it. Do I think this movie is something that you need to rush out and see in the cinemas? Absolutely not. Having said that, I think that's also what the producers of the show have in mind, which is to say, hey, look, we're not trying to be a summer blockbuster. We just want to be a relatively cheap movie for you to enjoy. And for movies like that, they're kind of perfect for a streaming platform.
So I agree with everything you said, of course, but I feel like there was a strategic miscalculation here. I first of all was impressed by the plot. I thought this was going to be like super miserable Dracula movie. And I agree with you. I thought it was a very good comedic take on Renfield and how they positioned him as in a toxic work relationship that he was trying to get out of. If they would have focused on that and made it like a true kind of comedy in that sense, I'm 100% in because I like all the cast and I like all the characters. Where I think it went a little bit off the rails is it went too much into the bloody, stabby violence.
Right.
And it wasn't real violence. And part of that is fitting with a comedy. I mean, they had like, in a way, kind of like quite innovative ways to like tear people's arms off and slash their guts and stuff in a way that wasn't intended to be like too gory, disgusting, still a little bit funny, but get across the like the violence. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
But I wish they would have like kept all of that out and made it just kind of like be in the background. You know, you could have Dracula come out and have him like with blood like around his mouth and be like, okay, he obviously ate some people, right? You could have Renfield come out, you know, with like bloody hands or something. I thought the fact that they veered into this very, very almost farcical type of like violent scenes undid like the actual kind of witty comedy that was laced throughout the movie. That's my real complaint, is that if it would have kept all that real slasher stuff out and kind of like behind the scenes, I think it actually would have been a really, really good movie. But there was just too much like gut slashing and like very comedic but gory kind of like gratuitous blood.
Yeah. For the avoidance of doubt,
Yeah.
I would suggest that if people aren't quite understanding what Ethan is saying, it's because it's complicated the way they've done it. So
Yeah.
everyone knows classic slasher horror gore, right? Which is like you see a bucket of paint and that's kind of thrown against the wall. You know, sometimes you'll see a person getting stabbed or cut up or shot, whatever. So that's one aspect of violence. Then the other aspect is kind of like the Quentin Tarantino style, which is excessive gore and violence to the point of almost like this is ridiculous, not funny. Like I don't find his gore and violence to be funny. I find it to be on the side of like, that's a bit ridiculous, you know, like we've seen that in
the blood spurting, you know, like you just see like the veins kind of pulsing and like blood just like spurting in the air, right?
Like crazy, right? We saw that especially with Kill Bill. We saw like that. I think Kill Bill for me was the perfect example of that.
Chopped limbs, right? That are just like blood
chopped limbs and then literally a fountain of blood, which you know never happens, right? Blood doesn't shoot 30 feet into the air after your head gets cut off, or God, I hope it doesn't. I mean, not that I know, but so that's I think the Quentin Tarantino
I like
style.
the disclaimer. Yeah.
And this, I think, was trying to be a little bit in between, which was to say we're going to be a little bit on the slasher horror side.
Yeah.
And then also a little bit on the gory Quentin Tarantino style. But because of the music, because of the action sequences, we're going to make this come off as look more comedic and farcical. I think that's the exact right word that you used is correct. I think farce is the exact right word. Farce to the point where it almost seems like a parody and a satire.
Yeah.
And that's why I think that's where they were going for it. I understand what your point is. And I don't want to try to paint you in a corner, but I think in general, when it comes to gore and ultra violence and things like that, you tend to be on the side of caution.
It's not my thing.
It's not your thing.
I mean, everyone who's listened to our episodes knows that I'm not one to shy away from like controversial stuff but I mean, violence is something else. But like you said, this was, you know, remember there's that one scene where he like ripped both the guy's arms off, which is of course silly. Yeah. And then he was like beating people with the arms, you know? Exactly. And it's just like either have a proper violent scene, you know, like John Wick style, have a proper violent scene.
Right.
Or put it behind the scenes and just like have him like be like, okay, you wait here to Aquafina, close the door, and you hear like all this ruckus, broken glass, and he comes out and he's all full of blood.
Or maybe he comes out and he's holding on to an arm. That's fine.
Yes. Yeah, you're right. Something like that I can live with because the rest of the film was actually kind of funny and witty, and I wanted to like it. Anyway, that was my complaint.
So that's funny you say that because I think the excessive violence, which was on the side of humor, like I think they were trying to be humorously violent. I think I agree with you, took it away.
I think they were trying to do that.
Right. And I downgraded that score by 1 unit on that basis.
Yeah.
I think otherwise, for example, if you look at the characters, I thought Aquafina did her role perfectly. I thought she comes
amazing. So likable in this movie, huh?
Not just funny, but I think that's exactly the right word. In every movie I've seen her in, she comes off as extremely likable. And if you don't believe me, watch Ocean's 8. That movie was, I thought, not good at all. But for me, one of the highlights of the movie was Aquafina. Even in Shang-Chi and the Legend of the Ten Rings, I thought she comes off as perfectly, not just likable, like almost like adorable in the sense like you're rooting for her no matter what. So I liked that for her. I thought Nicholas Hoult was really funny.
I agree.
I thought he was great. And I also thought that, how could I bury the lead here? Nicolas Cage as a comedic take on Dracula, I thought was perfect.
Yep, I agree.
I thought he was absolutely perfect. He was super, like, almost menacing, but not quite, like when he approaches that support group.
Yeah.
And when he comes and talks to them, I thought that was brilliant. I thought that was just good. I enjoyed it very much.
I was just hoping, I have to say, this movie was way better than I expected, but apart from the violence, I wish they would have, or maybe as part of the migration of violence, I wish it would have been more like Nicolas Cage being like this exasperated boss, like, hey man, I'm Dracula, I'm a killer. You're supposed to be my familiar. You're failing. I need you to like step up your game. I think that type of dichotomy, where the boss is like, man, I'm trying to be like so evil here, and you're like mucking up my game. Similar to what you see in like Minions, right? With who's the boss of the Minions?
Gru.
Yeah, Gru. Or when you see like the boss who really wants to be evil, but like everything's kind of like foiling him. That's a very good kind of like comedic trope, right? And I thought Nicolas Cage would have played that fantastic, where he's a guy who wants to be bad, and he's like, my support network is not allowing me to like fulfill my badness,
Yeah.
That would have been super funny, right?
I think that would have been the safer way to go for sure, because that's a great comedic trope, right? Where the bumbling idiots around him are the cause for that. I think that this took it in a novel direction, which was to say he wasn't let down because his assistant was a bumbling idiot. In fact, it's the exact opposite, right? He survived this long because his assistant was so good and loyal. Yeah. It's just that his assistant was just tired of being bullied effectively. I don't know. I really enjoyed it.
Grades. What are you going to do?
I walked out of this movie and I thought this was definitely a must watch in cinemas. And then I thought about it a little longer. And I said,
that's your Nick bias kicking in. Yeah.
Exactly. You're absolutely right. It was my Nicolas Cage bias.
Must watch.
I think that in retrospect, and then I did adjust my grade. I think it's a wait for streaming for most people. I think you're going to really enjoy it because it's a story we kind of tangentially know, right? We recognize all the characters. And I think that it's a unique enough take on a story like that. I'm sure somebody in Hollywood after this writer's strike is coming up with the same exact thing for Mary Shelley's Frankenstein and Frankenstein's monster.
Yeah.
Where, instead of Frankenstein's monster being like this dumb oaf, it's actually Dr. Frankenstein who's an idiot, and he somehow lucks on to creating this incredible genius who somehow they put Einstein's brain in the body.
I admire your grade. I'm sorry to have to tell you, I give this a skip. And that goes back to the definition of our rating system, right?
Yeah.
And the reason is you are not because it's not going to entertain you a little bit if you watch it, you're not missing anything. All your friends are not going to be talking about this. You're not going to be left out of like any inside jokes. You're not going to be imparted with like any really funny, witty lines. You're not missing any amazing cinematographic footage. You're not going to be missing out. Your life will be no less full if you don't see this movie. If you do see this movie and you wait for it on streaming and you sit through, an hour and 10 minutes, you're not going to be unhappy. You'll be like, okay, I saw it. And then you'll be like, I probably could have gotten those 2 hours back. But yeah, it was okay. I laughed a little bit. It was not terrible.
Yeah.
So I'm
Ethan
giving
would
it.
not call me and ask for my password to watch this movie.
True.
Whereas I definitely would.
Yeah, you would.
Yeah.
Because you love Nick Cage, you would definitely be like, hey, I'm not going to go see this in cinemas. Give me your Netflix password
or it's on Flim Flam or whatever other nonsense network that comes out this week.
Yeah.
So I need your password.
Take it for what it is, but that is Renfield. And now the next one we're going to discuss is Guy Ritchie's Covenant, which is my wheelhouse.
100%. Yeah.
100%. First of all, bravo to Guy Ritchie for making a film I absolutely would not have associated him with.
If you didn't tell me that this was Guy Ritchie, like if the title card didn't say Guy Ritchie's The Covenant, I would not have believed you that this was a Guy Ritchie movie.
Number two, if you look at the film art, it's a soldier with an American flag patch on his arm. I half would have expected this would be Guy Ritchie's if it was about the British military, maybe, right? But I would not have expected him to make a movie about the US military.
And if it were a British military, I would expect that there was some kind of heist that 3 military guys were trying to do.
Like the A-Team with Jason Statham. Yeah.
Or while evacuating Afghanistan, they're just like, we found like 16
correct.
tons of gold. Remember
You're
that
right.
George Clooney movie, Three Kings?
Yeah, Three Kings.
Yeah. So that I could totally see Guy Ritchie doing.
Or the remake, the A-Team.
or the remake A-Team. That's 100% a Guy Ritchie premise, which is
a
squad has uncovered an unknown treasure trove, and they're just like, how do we get it from Kabul to Essex?
Yeah. But it's not. It's about US military when they were in Afghanistan in the early, I guess it could be any time between the early 2000s and recently, starring Jake Gyllenhaal, who does an exceptional job, by the way.
Yeah.
Unbelievable job as a soldier named John Kinley. And the premise is that, he and his, I want to say platoon, but that's probably not the right word, have an interpreter. Actor Dar Salim plays a character named Ahmed. And Ahmed is a little bit of a pain in the ass interpreter. He voices his opinion. He's controversial. He doesn't stay quiet. He's an activist interpreter, right? And Jake and his team are kind of like, look, dude, like, you're getting in the way. You're hogging the spotlight. You're just an interpreter. Like, you do what we say, right? There's a big scene. The majority of Gyllenhaal's squad is wiped out. And Ahmed, with like just a rickshaw, is that the right word? Or like a handmade cart.
Yeah.
Basically carries a wounded Gyllenhaal, 10 kilometers?
No, 100 kilometers. That was the whole point. It was 120 kilometers to the base.
120 kilometers across a violent Afghanistan, where everyone is kind of looking for this US soldier, and his interpreter brings him to the US base, where Gyllenhaal is given the medical care he needs near death. The interpreter never to be seen again. Gyllenhaal sent back to the US, and of course can't live with himself knowing that the man who saved him is still out there fearing for his life. Gyllenhaal goes back and goes to get him.
That's exactly right. So premise, excellent, but again, not Guy Ritchie.
Not Guy Ritchie at all.
Visually, I mean, the film was shot, not that I know, again, I'm not a soldier, but it felt quite accurate.
I agree.
It felt genuine. It felt authentic.
Yes.
It felt like what an American soldier would do and how he would treat an interpreter.
Yeah.
So I thought that was good. The only things that made me think that, yes, this is Guy Ritchie, is that, when they started talking in military speak, he would have the words translate as to what they meant on the screen. And that's it. That's literally it. There was no other Guy Ritchie-esque flair.
Yeah.
There was no killer soundtrack. There was no like hijinks. There was no one hanging off a bridge trying to get a 20 million pound gun. Nothing like that.
No crazy tech. Nothing. I agree with you that I felt that the realism was, you see a lot of movies with like US special forces, and it's kind of like 5 against 100. And they're all like exceptional sharpshooters, and they avoid anyone, dying or getting wounded or everything, right? This was more like Black Hawk Down-ish, where everyone was, kind of ambushed, and you saw like the discrepancy between like the number of, Afghanis and the fewer number of American soldiers. And then you see like in great detail, how the Ahmed character, brought Gyllenhaal back and all the different, clever things that he did. And that's just the first half of the movie. Then the second half of the movie is the emotional part. I have to say, I was gutted, I was really, really gutted. And I thought that Gyllenhaal played it so well. You know, how he dealt with his wife in a super cool way, because sometimes you see a movie like this and the guy comes back and he's like lashing out or has a drinking problem, and it's like, oh man, like pull it together. He was super cool to his wife. He was very, very decent and composed, right? He didn't really show like he had this like night sweats or like crazy stuff. He never like played with a gun while he was drunk, right? We've seen that in a lot of movies, right?
Yeah.
He was very composed, just saying like, dude, I can't live like this. Like I cannot, knowing that the guy is there, goes back. And then my favorite cameo, did you catch it? Parker is Homelander.
What? Was that Anthony Starr?
Yes.
That's awesome. I didn't even put two and two together.
Oh man, yes. It's an unrecognizable Anthony Starr, from Homelander, Amazon's The Boys. That's why I messaged you breathlessly. I'm like, dude, there's an amazing cameo, remember?
And when you sent me that message, I had finished watching the movie and I was like, who did I miss? Was it one of the squaddies? I didn't think anything of it. That's how unbelievable Anthony Starr is, by the way, is that you wouldn't recognize him. When I see Anthony Starr, I only think of him as Homelander now.
I know. Can you watch it again? He's amazing. That Parker character was really, I love that character. And the other cameo was the guy from Vikings.
I never saw Vikings, so.
Oh, you never saw Vikings?
No.
I think the dude is named Alexander Ludwig.
Okay.
The big blonde guy who does like the fax machine stuff?
The EXO, yeah.
That's Bjorn Lothbrok, if you've ever watched Vikings.
Okay.
So those two made huge cameos, but the Parker cameo I thought was amazing. He plays like it's kind of like a Blackwater-ish outfit, right?
Effectively, yeah.
Amazing cameo. So the ending, obviously it's got a very positive ending, but I was just like a puddle. I thought it was like so incredibly emotional. I thought it was a very, very good film, start to finish. And I have to say, a lot of military films are very politically charged, right? So depending upon who you are, it isn't always easy to watch a war film, like especially Afghanistan, where there's a lot of opinions, let's say, right? But I felt like this is something that no matter who you are, whatever side of that political spectrum you're on, you can watch this movie and it's a story worth rooting for,
And that's my point about both of these movies, probably more about this than Renfield, is that this is the perfect low stakes movie. And again, within the movie, there's a lot of stakes involved with the storyline and in the plot. But when I say low stakes, in the sense that it is inoffensive, i.e., it's appealing to everyone. I don't think that if you're on the left side of the political spectrum or the right side of the political spectrum, you may have a few qualms here and there. But at the end of the day, this isn't about politics. This is a rescue mission through and through. He rescued me. I am honorable. I have to rescue him now. And I think that's a story that appeals to anybody, no matter what you believe politically.
Yeah.
Because it's low stakes, if you don't see a sequel to this movie, it's not a big deal because the story felt complete. If they make a sequel to this movie, we'll both be intrigued as to how and why, but we'll definitely watch it. And I like that it wasn't a typical ha-ha movie that Guy Ritchie made, right? Guy Ritchie's thing is he likes to do things which are a little bit on the side of clever and humor, and this movie would not have survived that.
I agree. There's got to be some type of interview or something where he explains what it is about this story that like captivated him, right?
Yeah.
He must have met an interpreter. He must have met someone like it's too close to home that he would have made this movie if it didn't somehow impact him personally, right?
Yeah, I agree.
I give this I think this is absolutely, I dare say, my favorite movie of 2023 so far.
Oh my God. Wow. Okay.
I absolutely loved it. It had the right mix of action, characters that you're legitimately cheering for, great ending. Anthony Starr coming in there as Parker, I was just like beside myself. I'm like, no way. I'm like, Pete, you gotta see this. I absolutely give it a must see in cinemas. It's still in some cinemas. If it comes out on video, absolutely see it on video. It's fantastic movie. Some of Guy Ritchie's best work, really.
Yeah, and for me, this is a wait for streaming, not because I think it's not worthy of seeing in the cinema. Certainly the action sequences and the set pieces are strong contenders. You'll enjoy seeing them on the big screen. But again, if you have 10 coworkers at the office, including yourself, I wouldn't expect 9 of them to have gone out to cinema to watch this and then are talking about it at the water cooler at the next day.
Oh, no. You're right.
And I think on that basis, I would suggest that, hey, this is probably a movie that you should go out of your way to watch when it comes on streaming. But I don't think you need to rush out to the cinema because you're going to suffer for it. Both these movies, Renfield and Covenant, kind of came out of nowhere for me. They were, blockbuster movies that were advertised 12 months ago, 24 months ago when they were still filming it. And they were just like, this is going to be the next big hit for whatever studio this is for. And I miss that. I think that a lot of Hollywood studios are so focused on the 3 or 4 months of the summer blockbuster release schedule that all of these mid-tier movies, and when I say mid-tier, I don't mean in quality, I mean in terms of budget, all of these mid-tier movies kind of fall by the wayside.
Yeah.
And I think this is also something we talked about a little bit with Uwe. We lament that these tentpole movies take away attention. I think in terms of quality, this movie is better than some of the blockbusters we saw last summer.
I agree with you. Even now, Fast X is coming out next week, right?
Yeah.
So already when you go like on a movie, like a cinema website, it's already booked now, right?
Yeah.
I feel like I'm going to be disappointed by that movie. I'm going to see it for sure, but I feel like I'm going to walk out of there and I'm going to say, well, I give them a lot of credit. Once again, they blew my mind with something that they did. But in terms of a good movie, nah. Whereas Covenant was like, man, I was in tears during Covenant. I thought it was just such a good story, and not just like a emotional drama. Like it had good action. It had the bridge scene was a very, very good scene. There was some pretty good stuff, right? So I mean, I agree. Like this is the movie that you want to see where you like walk out of there and like you're breathless, like, oh man, Pete, that was so good. Did you know that? Did you see this? We're going to walk out of Fast X. We won't see it together. But if we did see it together, we'd walk out of that and we'd be like, yeah, that's
unbelievable. The cars look beautiful. The women look beautiful. I can't believe they flew a car off a bridge.
Yeah.
And family. Yeah. Oh, speaking of which, news alert. I heard that The Rock is coming back for the Fast and the Furious franchise after publicly feuding with Vin Diesel.
He'll be in 10?
I think so, if not 10 in the futures. And I think the rumors are that he's come back or is coming back because his reputation is kind of in the dumps at the moment with Hollywood based on like his behavior with Black Adam. So I think he wants to get back into the franchise to A, book a movie that's actually going to make a lot of money, and B, to kind of showcase to Hollywood that he is a team player no matter what the circumstances are. This is just a rumor at this point. I've heard that he's coming back and that he may have filmed a secret role for this movie. But if not for this, there's strong rumors that he's coming back for
11.
This movie was supposed to be part 1 of the last 2 movies. And now apparently the early buzz on the movie is so good within the studio that they want to make the second part a 3-parter. So there could be at least another 2 movies coming out. Anyway, sorry, that was a tangent.
It's a well-deserved tangent. I mean, the Fast franchise it's been exceptional. I mean, we give them a whole lot of credit, even despite all the nonsense and the fact that everyone's getting pretty old to be jumping all over the place, but give them a lot of credit. So, I mean, definitely we'll see it and definitely we'll feel like we got our money's worth. But
in terms of quality, I think you're absolutely right. I think we're going to watch and say, hey, you know what? That was worth the $25. That was a great popcorn movie. We don't really have to think about it. I can't believe they blew up a submarine with like a tail light from their Mustang somehow. That's the kind of thing that I'd expect from them. That's absolutely fine. But this movie, I like the fact that it came out of nowhere. I like the fact that it was really low budget, low stakes, low profile, as it were. And it blew me away. I thought it was very good. I don't think that this is something that you need to rush out to the cinema for, but I like that this is kind of movie was made. You know what this reminded me of? Michael Bay's Ambulance. First of all, Michael Bay would definitely make a movie like this.
Yeah.
He loves that military thing, the honor thing.
Yeah. All the US flags. All the US flags.
You know? But what I mean by like Ambulance in the sense that it's very small scale story, and it's not filled with like huge action set pieces like Michael Bay has done in the past. It's kind of like a mature version of a Michael Bay movie.
But Pete, as really a filmmaker, I give Guy Ritchie a lot of credit for putting this together in a super good way.
Yeah, absolutely.
Look at Fast X, Vin Diesel, Jordana Brewster, who's not known for anything other than this movie, Tyrese, Michelle Rodriguez, who's way better in Dungeons and Dragons, Ludacris, Momoa, John Cena, Jason Statham, Helen Mirren, Brie Larson, Charlize Theron, Nathalie Emmanuel, Cardi B. This movie, with this budget, cannot help to be reasonably successful. It's impossible with this cast, with this budget, with all the production value that they're going to put into it. It's impossible. And I don't say that to minimize the director. Sometimes it's harder to manage a team with all stars. I'm sure it's a pain in the ass, right? But just financially, the movie's going to be good.
The movie's going to be lucrative. I don't know about good, but lucrative.
It will at least have a lot of sparkly stuff in it, and it will gain your attention, right? The action sequences will be good. The cars will be shiny. There will be a lot of bombs and stuff. And that's very important. But again, why I think The Covenant was so good is that that was a very hard story to write.
Yeah.
With Gyllenhaal is definitely a star, but not so. Gyllenhaal's known for kind of like this, I don't want to say like brooding, but kind of like this doe-eyed, slightly annoyed type of actor, right? He's not like this beloved John Cena, The Rock, one of these other like ultra charismatic Tom Cruise types. Like he played this role really, really well. Dar Salim has some credits to his name. Absolutely not a household name, right? So I thought that it was just an incredible job to put together a story that's really compelling.
I think that's the difference. When we walk out of Fast X next Friday, you and I both are aware that on Monday, everybody at our office is going to be talking about that movie. Everyone's going to talk about how their kids cannot stop talking about this unbelievable stunt where they flew a helicopter upside down over a Boeing 737 as it was landing on a glacier. That's the kind of thing that this thing is known for.
In the rain. Yeah. In the rain.
Right, of course. That's the difference between those two movies. Having said that, I would prefer that they make, and I think this was the same point that Uwe was making, that make 10 of these movies instead of one Fast X.
Yeah.
Because even if there's only a 40% hit rate, 4 of these movies are going to be as good or better than this. And Fast X, I mean, you know what you're getting we've talked about 3 stupid scenarios on this podcast alone for Fast X, and all 3 of them are equally likely to be in the next movie.
Are there like any betting lines for Fast X? I would say like, will Dominic Toretto's sleeveless shirt have a collar or no collar? Will Ludacris have more or less than 3 lines?
He'll have more than 3 lines, but only because he's going to be talking to Tyrese.
Oh, Tyrese only has like 3 lines. Roman, right?
Yeah, Roman and Tej are going to argue the entire time as they always have.
Yep.
Vin Diesel's going to be shirtless when we first see him, but then he's going to have the wife beater on for the rest of the movie.
Yeah.
He's going to have that massive cross on his neck.
Yep.
John Cena isn't going to be in the movie for the first like 1.5 hours, and he'll come in as a Deus Ex Machina to save the day for like 10 minutes and then drive away. Like he'll just be there to save the day at the last possible minute because everyone will have forgotten about him by then. There's so many things that I can predict that even if they don't come through in the movie, it's so plausible that they probably had it in the movie at some point.
That is our mini review of, well, it turned into Fast X as well, preview, but it's really about Renfield. Pete loved it. If you love Dracula and if you love Nick Cage, absolutely, or Nicholas Hoult, go see it. And The Covenant, Guy Ritchie's masterpiece, which I really think is my favorite film so far of 2023. And a little bit of preview of Fast X, which where do we put Fast X on our prediction list? 1 or 2 or 3?
I think we both put it third.
Okie dokie, that's Films and Stuff mini film reviews. And I guess you could also say mini film preview.
Indeed, that's right. So stay tuned for this time next week. We will be watching and reviewing Fast X for you. Presumably our eardrums will have survived the numerous explosions.
And we probably got some other stuff to talk about too. We'll see what we've got.
That's right. If you like these movies or didn't like these movies, or do you have any other movies you'd like us to do mini reviews on?
Tell us.
Let us know. You can tweet at us at FNS Podcast. You can DM us on Instagram at Films and Stuff Podcast. You can send us an old school email, aloha@filmsandstuffpodcast.com. Or the easiest way is to like this video and leave us a comment below. That really helps us out.
Indeed. And I'd like to thank you, Pete, for introducing us to Renfield, and Ethan, that's me, for The Covenant.
Thank you.
Everyone, please watch these 2 films.
Indeed. Thanks, Ethan. Thanks, everyone.
We'll see you all next time on Films and Stuff. Bye now.
Thank you for listening to another episode of Films and Stuff. If you haven't already, please subscribe and review on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever podcasts are downloaded. Films and Stuff. There is no substitute.